Emily was new in the town of Mabira. She lived with her aunt in a small house near the old market. Every morning she walked to school with a neat bag, her shoes polished though they were old. She never spoke much, but she always greeted the teachers and smiled at everyone she met. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. Some students liked her calm nature, but others saw it as weakness. They wondered why she never joined their noisy talks or games during break time. In class, Emily always sat in the front row, focused and quiet. She loved reading stories about strong people who stayed kind even when the world was cruel. Her favorite subject was literature, and her handwriting looked neat and careful, just like her way of living. But her silence made her different, and in school being different often made someone a target. Tund, a tall boy who loved attention, started teasing her one morning. "Look at her shoes," he laughed loudly. "Did she pick them from the river?" His friends Sifa and Musa burst out laughing. Emily looked down at her shoes but said nothing. She kept her eyes on her notebook, her pen moving slowly across the page. That only made them laugh harder. "She thinks she's better than us," Sifa said, crossing her arms. Emily raised her head and looked at them, her eyes calm but deep. For a moment Tun stopped laughing. Her gaze wasn't angry, it was steady, like she could see through him. It made him uncomfortable. He turned away and muttered something under his breath, pretending not to care. But even as he walked off, he felt something strange, as if the air around her was heavier than before. Days passed and the teasing continued. They hid her books, poured water on her desk, and mocked her when she answered questions in class. Emily never shouted, never fought back. She just carried on, her face calm as always. Some students started to feel sorry for her, but no one dared to defend her. The bullies seemed to grow stronger with each cruel laugh. One afternoon, during break, Emily was sitting under a mango tree reading. Tund and his group walked by. "Still reading your useless books?" Musa said. "Maybe you should read How to Make Friends." The group laughed again. Emily closed her book slowly, looked at them, and said quietly, "It's better to be alone than to walk with people who don't know their path." Her words were soft, but they cut deep. The laughter faded for a second. They didn't know how to answer her. Sifa frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, but Emily had already gone back to reading as if they didn't exist. Tund clenched his fists. "She's acting smart again," he said. But inside he felt something strange, like he had picked a fight he might one day regret. That evening, as Emily walked home, the sun dipped low over the hills. The wind blew through her braids, carrying the smell of dust and mango leaves. She stopped near the river, her reflection rippling in the water. "Why must kindness be seen as weakness?" she whispered to herself. She closed her eyes, and for a brief moment, the air around her shifted. The leaves rustled even though there was no wind. Emily opened her eyes again and smiled sadly. "They will learn," she said softly, almost like a promise, not out of anger but something deeper, something quiet and certain. At school the next day, Tun noticed something odd. His locker door wouldn't open no matter how hard he tried. Musa's pen kept breaking each time he tried to write. Sifa slipped twice on the same step, even though the floor was dry. They all laughed it off, but deep inside each of them felt uneasy. Emily said nothing. She simply walked to class with her usual calm face, her books held close to her chest. But for the first time no one whispered when she passed by. The same calm look that once made them laugh now made them shiver a little. And though no one could explain it, something about Emily began to feel different. There was a quiet power in her silence, one that even the loudest bullies couldn't ignore anymore. The day of the school event was bright and hot. The students gathered under the big mango trees near the assembly ground. Teachers sat in a long row and music played from the old speakers. Everyone was laughing, clapping, and cheering as names were called for prizes. Emily sat quietly on the wooden bench, her hands resting on her knees. She had earned the top prize for her excellent grades, but her face showed no pride, only calmness. When her name was called, she stood up slowly. Her uniform was clean, her braids neat, and her eyes focused. She walked to the front while the crowd clapped politely. Some students whispered among themselves. "Look at her acting like a saint," Sifa muttered. Tun smirked. "Let's make her remember this day," he said. The teachers smiled as Emily bowed slightly and received her certificate. She thanked them softly and turned to go back to her seat. But before she could take 2 steps, she felt something cold splash all over her. Muddy water covered her white blouse and skirt. The crowd gasped for a moment, then laughter exploded. Some students held their stomachs as they laughed. Others pointed and whispered. Emily stood there silently, drops of brown water sliding down her face. Her certificate was soaked, her neat braids dripping. She didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. Her calm eyes lifted and found Tund in the crowd. He was laughing harder than anyone, a bucket still in his hand. Sifa stood beside him, smiling but unsure now. The laughter started to fade when they saw Amelie's expression. She didn't look embarrassed or angry. She just looked steady, quiet, and cold in a strange way. Her lips moved slightly and she said softly, "You should not have done that." Her voice was low, but everyone near her heard it clearly. It carried through the air like a quiet echo. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Even the wind paused and the leaves of the mango tree hung still. A strange silence filled the place. The teachers exchanged confused looks. One teacher stood up and shouted at the students, demanding who threw the water, but no one spoke. Tund tried to laugh again, but the sound came out weak. His heart was beating fast and he didn't know why. Amelie turned and walked away slowly. The crowd opened a path for her, no one daring to say a word. Mud still dripped from her skirt, but she walked as if it didn't matter. Her calm face looked untouchable, like someone who carried something stronger than pride, something deeper. She went behind the school building and stood there quietly. The sun burned bright above her, but a small shadow formed around her feet, dark and cool. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. "Peace is my strength," she whispered. But peace must sometimes defend itself. Inside the hall, Tund began to feel strange. He wiped his forehead, but it felt colder than before. Musa started coughing suddenly, and Sifa dropped her drink for no reason. The teachers didn't notice at first, but the laughter was gone. The air felt heavy and the students began whispering nervously. Later that day, Amelie walked home through the dusty road. The sun was setting and birds flew low across the sky. She stopped by the old river again and washed her uniform. The mud floated away in the water. Her reflection looked calm, but her eyes were deep, like they carried storms within. She touched the water softly and said, "Let them learn through their own deeds." At Tund's home that night, strange things began happening. His room light flickered even though the power hadn't gone out. The bucket he used that afternoon tipped over on its own, spilling clean water across the floor. He couldn't sleep. He kept hearing Amelie's soft voice in his mind, "You should not have done that." Sifa had nightmares, the same one over and over, of standing in the schoolyard while muddy water poured from the sky. She woke up shaking. Musa felt dizzy all day, unable to focus. None of them talked about it, but all of them thought of Amelie. The next morning, when Amelie entered the classroom, everyone went silent. She sat in her usual place and opened her book. No one laughed. No one whispered. Tund kept his head down, pretending to write. Even Sifa, who loved to talk, stayed quiet. There was something about her now, something that made everyone want to keep their distance. But Amelie didn't look at them. She studied quietly, her pen moving slowly across the paper. The calm around her was heavy, like a storm waiting behind a peaceful sky. No one dared to speak to her, yet everyone watched her from the corner of their eyes. During lunch, she sat alone under the mango tree again, eating a small piece of bread. Birds landed near her feet, unafraid. The air felt cooler around her, peaceful yet powerful. Some students began whispering that she might not be ordinary, that perhaps there was something hidden behind her silence. Amelie looked up at the sky and smiled faintly. People show their hearts through their actions, she thought. Some hearts must be taught to see. And from that day no one threw anything at her again. No one dared to mock her clothes or her quiet voice. But deep inside, everyone knew something had changed, something that couldn't be laughed away. The sun rose over Mabira with its usual brightness, but for Tund and his friends the day started badly. When Tund came out of his house, he found his motorbike standing just as he left it the night before. He tried to start it, but the engine only coughed and died. He checked the fuel. It was full. He tried again and again, but nothing worked. Sweat rolled down his face as he kicked the pedal angrily. The motorbike made a short sound, then went silent. He gave up and walked to school, grumbling. At the same time, Sifa sat on her bed staring at her phone. It had fallen from her table that morning and now the screen was black. She pressed the buttons, tried charging it, even shook it, but it refused to turn on. "Why today?" she whispered in frustration. She thought about Amelie for a moment, then pushed the thought away. "It's just bad luck," she told herself. When they all reached school, they met Musa sitting outside the class with long sleeves covering his arms. His face looked pale. When Sifa asked what happened, he pulled up his sleeve. His skin was red and full of rashes. "It started this morning," he said quietly. "I don't know why." The group fell silent. None of them laughed now. The whispers began again, not from them but from the rest of the students. "Something's happening to the bullies," someone said. "Maybe Emily's behind it." Another voice added, "You remember her words? She told Tund, you should not have done that. Maybe she meant this." By midday, even the teachers had noticed how quiet the school felt. The usual noise and laughter were gone. Everyone seemed uneasy. Emily walked through the hallways, calm as always, her books held close to her chest. But people stepped aside when she passed, whispering softly. Jabari, a boy known for his kindness, had been watching her all morning. He remembered how she stood covered in mud the day before, silent and strong. Unlike the others, he didn't believe she had cursed anyone. He saw something different, a girl who carried her pain quietly without anger. During lunch break, he found Emily sitting under the old mango tree again. The same place she always chose, peaceful and shaded. She was staring at the sky, not eating, not reading. Just thinking. Jabari walked up slowly and sat beside her. "Everyone's talking," he said softly. "They say you did something to them." Emily didn't look at him. She just brushed some dust off her skirt and said, "People always talk. Words are easy. Truth is not." Jabari watched her face. Her eyes looked tired, not proud or angry, just sad. "You didn't do anything, did you?" he asked. She turned to him then, her voice calm and soft. "I did nothing. The world only gives back what we send into it. If we throw pain, pain returns. If we give peace, peace finds us again." Jabari stayed quiet. Her words echoed in his mind. They sounded simple, but they carried something heavy, a kind of wisdom that didn't belong to someone their age. The wind blew gently through the trees, and for a moment, everything around them felt still. Later that day, as Jabari walked home, he couldn't stop thinking about what she said. The world gives back what we send into it. He thought about how Tund had laughed when he threw the water, how Sifa had joined in, and how they all felt proud afterward. Now everything seemed different. That evening, the strange things didn't stop. Tund tried again to fix his motorbike, but now the lights wouldn't turn on at all. His father called a mechanic who checked everything and said, "There's nothing wrong. It should work." But it didn't. Sifa's phone still refused to turn on. When she tried using her mother's phone, the call didn't go through. Musa's rashes got worse, spreading to his neck. They all stayed quiet about it, but each of them thought the same thing: Emily. At school the next day, Jabari noticed how everyone avoided Emily even more. Some girls moved their chairs away when she sat near them. The bullies whispered among themselves but didn't dare to go near her. Tund's proud walk was gone. His shoulders looked heavy. Sifa's smile had disappeared. Emily, however, stayed the same. She came to class on time, wrote her notes neatly, and greeted the teachers politely. When someone dropped a pencil, she picked it up and returned it with a small smile. It was as if nothing had happened. But Jabari could see something different now. When he looked into her eyes, he didn't see anger. He saw hurt. Not the kind that shows on the outside, but the kind that stays deep inside, quiet and strong. He realized that Emily wasn't trying to scare anyone. She just carried a kind of power that came from truth, and truth had its own way of answering the world. That night, Jabari sat on his bed, unable to sleep. The moonlight shone through his window and he remembered her voice. "The world only gives back what we send into it." He thought about how many times people laughed at others without care, how easy it was to be cruel, and how rare it was to be kind. The next morning he made a choice. When he saw Emily walking to class, he walked beside her. People stared, whispering, but he didn't care. She looked at him, surprised, and smiled slightly. "You're not afraid?" she asked. He shook his head. "No," he said. "Because I think you're right. Maybe it's not you who did anything. Maybe it's life showing them what they gave." Emily's smile grew faint but warm. "Then you understand," she said. "That is enough." And as they walked together, the morning sun touched their faces. Behind them, Tund watched silently, guilt twisting inside him. Sifa looked away, ashamed. Musa kept scratching his arm, his eyes full of regret. No one said it out loud, but deep down everyone knew something was changing. Not just for Emily but for all of them. Something bigger than fear had begun, a quiet lesson that the world had started to teach. The afternoon sun dipped low over Mabira, turning the sky into shades of gold and orange. Jabari followed Emily from a distance, his steps quiet on the dusty road. School had ended and most students had gone home laughing, but Emily took a different path, one that led away from the busy streets and into the quiet edge of the village. He was curious, not out of fear but because something inside him wanted to understand her better. Emily walked calmly, her long skirt brushing against dry grass as she followed the narrow trail. The air smelled different there, thick with herbs, smoke and the faint sweetness of flowers. Birds called softly in the distance. Jabari slowed down when he saw a small hut hidden under a large tree. Smoke curled gently from the roof, and strings of dried herbs hung by the door. That was when he realized whose home it was, the hut of Nana Kasai, Amelie's grandmother. Everyone in the village knew about her. Some called her a healer, others in whispers said she was a woman of old ways. But most people came to her when nothing else worked, when medicines failed, when crops wouldn't grow, or when peace left a home. Jabari stayed behind a large tree, careful not to make a sound. Through the half-open window, he could see Amelie standing in front of her grandmother. The old woman sat near the fire, stirring a pot filled with leaves and steam. Her gray hair was tied in a scarf, and her eyes, though aged, shone with a sharp, knowing light. "Child," Nana Kasai said softly, "the world around you is shifting again. I can feel it in the wind." Amelie lowered her head. "I didn't mean for any of it to happen, Nana," she said quietly. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." The old woman nodded slowly, her voice calm. "I know you didn't wish for harm. But power listens not only to words, it listens to the heart. When pain sits inside you, it answers pain with pain." Amelie looked at the floor. "They humiliated me in front of everyone. I stayed quiet, but something inside me, it woke up. I felt it, like the air became heavy, like the ground was listening." Jabari felt his breath catch. He leaned closer, trying to hear every word. Nana Kasai stirred the pot again. "That was not anger, my child," she said. "That was protection. The spirits of your blood remember who you are. They watch when the innocent are wronged. But remember, such a gift must be guided. It can heal just as easily as it can destroy." Amelie raised her eyes, her voice trembling. "But Nana, what if I can't control it? What if it hurts someone who doesn't deserve it?" Her grandmother smiled gently, reaching out to touch her hand. "Then you will learn, little one. You will learn to speak with calmness, to breathe before you feel. The world needs balance, not anger. That is your path." The fire crackled softly, and the smell of herbs grew stronger. Jabari stood silently, the meaning of their words sinking into his heart. He realized now that Amelie wasn't just a quiet girl with strange luck. She carried something powerful, something ancient that lived inside her blood and soul. It wasn't evil. It wasn't revenge. It was balance. After a moment, Nana Kasai spoke again. "Do you remember what I told you when you were little? The wind does not strike unless the trees move first. The same is true for you. You do not harm first, you only return what the world gives." Amelie nodded slowly. "I understand, Nana. I will try to make things right." The old woman smiled, her eyes soft. "Good. Tomorrow, take water from the stream before sunrise. Sprinkle it at the school gate and say nothing. It will calm the restless spirits and wash away fear." Jabari's eyes widened. He had never heard anyone speak like that before. It felt strange and sacred. As the night fell, he watched Amelie help her grandmother pack the herbs into small bags. They talked softly, almost like the wind was part of their words. Jabari stepped back quietly, careful not to be seen, but his mind was full. Every question he had about Amelie suddenly made sense. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't cursed. She was simply different. A girl who carried the quiet strength of something bigger than herself, something the world around her didn't understand. As he walked home, the moon began to rise, bright and round. The air felt peaceful again, like the village itself was resting. Jabari thought about how the others had treated her, how fear had blinded them. "They never knew who she really is," he whispered to himself. "They don't know that her silence is not weakness." That night, Amelie stood outside the hut, looking at the stars. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her heart, "Use your gift to heal, not to hurt." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Somewhere deep inside she felt a soft warmth, a gentle promise that she would use her strength for good. And in that quiet corner of Mabira, under the glow of the moon and the scent of herbs, both Amelie and Jabari carried a secret, the truth of a power born not from anger, but from the desire to protect and restore. The next morning, when Amelie walked to school, Jabari followed her again. She carried a small gourd of clear water from the stream. Without a word, she sprinkled it lightly by the gate, her lips moving in silence. The wind blew gently across the field, and for the first time in days the air felt calm. Students began to laugh again. The fear that had filled their hearts started to fade. No one knew what Amelie had done, but everything began to feel normal once more. Jabari smiled quietly to himself. He knew then that her grandmother was right. Amelie's gift was not to destroy but to heal. And soon, The world would see that the quiet girl they once mocked was never meant to bring fear but peace. That night, the sky above Mabira changed. Clouds rolled in thick and heavy, covering the stars one by one. The wind began to whisper through the trees, growing stronger with every breath. The air smelled of rain and something electric, something alive. People shut their doors early, calling their children inside. Dogs barked in the distance, uneasy. It was as if the village itself could feel that something was coming. Emily sat by her window, watching the sky light up in flashes of white. Her grandmother's words from the night before still echoed in her mind. Balance always finds its way, child. You need not lift a hand. Emily didn't move. She just watched, quiet and calm, as the storm grew. Far across the village, near the school, Tund and his friends were still hanging around the big tree by the gate. It was their usual place, where they told jokes, made fun of others, and felt untouchable. But tonight the laughter was uneasy. The wind howled through the branches, and lightning flashed so close that it made the ground tremble. Sifa crossed her arms and said, "This storm feels strange." Tund scoffed, but his voice shook a little. "It's just rain. Don't be scared of weather." Then the thunder hit, so loud that it made them all jump. The wind ripped through the tree, and in a flash of light, lightning struck the very spot where they stood. The ground burst open with a bright crack, throwing sparks into the air. The boys fell back, shouting in shock. For a few seconds the whole world went white. Then everything went silent except for the heavy sound of rain. When they opened their eyes, the big tree, the same one they had leaned against for years, was split in half. Smoke rose from its trunk. None of them were hurt, but fear filled their faces. They ran home through the rain without saying a word, their hearts pounding. By morning the storm had passed. The village streets were covered in wet leaves, and the air smelled clean and new. The sun rose softly as if nothing had happened. But inside the school, whispers filled the hallways. Everyone had heard what happened to the bullies in the tree. Emily arrived quietly, her books pressed to her chest. She didn't look at anyone, just walked to her seat as usual. When the teacher entered, the class fell silent. But before lessons could begin, the door opened again. Tund, Sifa, and the others stepped in slowly. Their faces were pale, their clothes still damp from the night before. They walked straight to Emily's desk. The room went completely silent. No one even breathed. Tund looked down at the floor before speaking. His voice was quiet and trembling. "Emily," he said, we are sorry. We were wrong to mock you." Sifa nodded quickly. "We didn't understand. Please forgive us." Emily looked at them for a long moment. Her eyes were calm, deep, and steady, the kind of look that made people feel seen but small at the same time. She could have said many things. She could have scolded them or reminded them of their cruelty. But instead she simply smiled. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room like music. "Now you know," she said. "Kindness is not weakness." The words hung in the air, warm and heavy. The teacher lowered her head. Some students wiped their eyes. Even Tund looked close to tears. From that day something changed in Mabira. The bullies who had once laughed at Emily never mocked anyone again. They helped carry water for younger students, shared food, and even stood up when others were teased. It was as if the storm had washed away not just fear but arrogance too. Emily became known not for her silence or her strange power, but for her calm strength. She never spoke of that night or the lightning that had struck the tree. When people asked her about it, she only said, "The world listens when the heart is pure." She continued to study, always sitting quietly by the window. Sometimes Jabari would join her after class and they'd talk about books, about life, and about how kindness could change more than anger ever could. As for Emily's gift, she never used it again to punish or to scare. Instead she used it to heal. When a classmate fell sick, she brought herbs from her grandmother's garden. When a family lost their crops, she helped them plant new seeds. And every time she helped, the wind would blow softly as if whispering its approval. Years later, when people spoke about her, they no longer called her the quiet girl or the strange one. They called her the girl who brought peace to Mabira. And though no one ever forgot the night of the storm, Emily never spoke of it again. She didn't need to. The village had learned its lesson. True strength was not in shouting, fighting, or mocking others. It was in calmness, forgiveness, and quiet power. Every morning, when Emily walked past the broken tree near the school, she would touch its rough trunk and smile. New leaves had begun to grow from the cracks, proof that even what is struck by lightning can heal with time. She whispered softly, "Balance always returns." And with that, she walked on, her steps light and steady, carrying with her the same calm strength that once turned fear into respect.